Hey everyone, this is Nick, and I had to cut like 5 or 6 different things I wanted to talk about from this video because there are way too many things happening at once this week. We have Fedora messing up out of fear of legal action and disabling hardware-accelerated encoding and decoding for certain video codecs. We have PopOS moving to yearly releases and skipping the 22.10 version. And we have Stadia being shut down by Google. And plus we also have some AMD performance improvements for Linux and a lot more stuff, including a new version of Peertube that might make me start using the platform. So let's get on with the news and let's get on with our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare, who make Kernel Care Enterprise among a lot of other services. Kernel Care Enterprise is a service that delivers a complete and automated solution to live patching, to maintenance, and to security management for your Linux systems. It basically removes the risk and complexity of applying critical updates, and it lets you do so without any downtime to your server fleet. So click the link below to start your free trial of Kernel Care Enterprise and start having a better upgrade experience for your servers. Looks like Fedora is making a pretty bad decision regarding video codecs. They will start building their Mesa packages without hardware acceleration support for video decoding and encoding for H.264, H.265 and VC1 by fear of software patents. This means that using open source drivers, starting with Fedora 37, VA API won't be available with these video codecs, and videos will be decoded and encoded using the CPU instead. Something that is way less efficient, can lead to stutters for higher resolutions, and uses more battery life. This change will also be backported to Fedora 36. They say that it being enabled before was an oversight, and that they don't want to ship anything that would break patent licensing and expose them to legal problems. Of course, users will be able to use custom Mesa packages to replace Fedoras, and I would be surprised if RPM Fusion or a Copper repo wasn't rapidly hosting that kind of package. But that's still something extra that people will have to do. It's unclear if other distros will follow, but it seems that Ubuntu still has hardware decoding and encoding enabled, and OpenSUSE decided to disable it as well going forward. It's a pretty dumb decision in my opinion, because this thing was enabled for the past 5 years or more without any legal repercussions, and it's basically backing down in the face of a potential threat that might never materialize. And it's also going to trigger a snowball effect for a lot of distros which are going to adopt the same stance, being afraid that they would get attacked because there is now a very public eye on this issue from maybe patent holders as well. They should just have had a solution in place before implementing that change. It's a pretty bad move in my opinion. If, like me, you're a PopOS user, you're probably not going to like this one. It looks like PopOS will not have an October release. As a matter of fact, it also won't have a 6-month release schedule at all anymore. Michael Murphy, a PopOS developer, confirmed that on Reddit, saying that they're going to focus their development time on the Rust implementation of Cosmic, instead of working on 22.10. According to Carl Ritschl, the CEO of System76, they'll be moving to annual releases entirely, and they will give more details next week. The reasoning behind it seems to be that it takes a lot of work to maintain Cosmic, and to make sure everything runs fine when you have to redo that work every 6 months. And since PopOS already has hardware updates for Mesa and the Linux kernel, which enable up-to-date drivers and hardware support, it kinda makes sense. System76 also ships PopOS on their laptops and desktops, and one can imagine that they test each new release to ensure it works perfectly on all their models, which also must eat a lot of QA time for everyone involved. And seeing that PopOS supports Flatpak, it's not really stuck on older application versions for too long. Still, there are a few issues with the approach. The libraries being provided, used for dev work, will be stuck for a full year, and the desktop itself will get no new features, including for the GNOME apps. So basically, if you use PopOS 22.04, you're never getting GNOME 43, and you might get GNOME 44 in 6 more months. I personally think it's a good decision for PopOS because they're mainly a distro that is shipped on their own hardware, and it needs to be tested and safe and secure, and being 1 year behind isn't really such a big issue for a lot of people. For me though, since I like and I kinda need to have all the latest desktop environment updates, it means that PopOS is out of the picture on my laptop and I'm gonna have to find something else. To the surprise of virtually no one, Google is shutting down its Stadia game streaming service. After the 18th of January 2023, servers will be closed, and Google will refund every player every purchase they made, including all the games they bought, as well as the hardware, DLC, basically everything except the subscription fees. Which kinda makes Stadia the best deal in gaming ever, for all the wrong reasons. As expected, the service that asked players to buy games full price to only be able to play them in the cloud didn't really gather much traction, and they will probably make the underlying technology available under a white label. The service was at the time seen by some as a doorway for developers to create Linux versions of their games, as the platform ran Linux under the hood, but this failed to materialize, as games ported to Stadia didn't really get pure Linux ports as well. And Proton definitely proved to be a much more useful solution to bridge the gap between Windows and Linux in terms of games. I can't really say I'm surprised. Google has a history of launching new services, promoting them very little and then cancelling them after 2 or 3 years when they are not instant hits or they don't have a halo effect for their other services. And Stadia just wasn't a good value proposition compared to other game streaming services like Xbox Game Pass, because this one just lets you have a lot more games for just a monthly fee. You don't need to buy each game outright, and it also works on browsers, Android phones, PCs, TVs, whatever. AMD users on Linux rejoice! It looks like an AMD engineer has discovered a way to make their CPUs run faster on Linux. A 20-year-old workaround for AMD systems was actually hurting Ryzen performance, and a fix will be applied to the Linux kernel version 6 to get rid of that bottleneck. The issue was with ACPI support, where the Linux kernel had a little tweak added to ensure compatibility with older AMD Athlon systems. But this workaround hasn't been needed for a while now, while still being present in the kernel's code. The result was the CPU was rapidly switching between busy and idle phases, because the kernel wanted to put it in a deeper C state, so basically a more idle state than what the CPU actually needed to be in. This led to a massive performance degradation, presumably specifically for intensive workloads like rendering or gaming, which tend to tax the CPU over long periods of time. There are no exact numbers on real-world use cases, but Phoronix will have benchmarks soon, so I'll make sure to report on that when they do. I just love it when they find new ways to make existing hardware perform better, especially when said hardware was already performing pretty darn well. And I'm excited to see what this change will bring in terms of gaming performance for my various systems, which mostly sport AMD CPUs. Okay, let's move on to what GNOME has been up to. Right after the release of GNOME 43, there's been a ton of work on GNOME apps. Newsflash, the feed reader, is now ported to GTK4 and can now sync with Nextcloud News and Fresh RSS, although it lost its sync capabilities to Feedly, as Feedly apparently changed something that made it incompatible. Dialect, the translation app, now uses the latest libadwaita widgets and has a flatter look. There's also a new release for Eyedropper, a powerful color picker, or for Plots, a graphing app that now supports the system's dark theme and uses GTK4 and libadwaita. Telegram, the Telegram client, saw a lot of work as well, with a new chat search panel, timestamps for messages, edited and sending statuses, mini thumbnails for media messages, and more. Gradients, the app that lets you theme libadwaita apps, now supports plugins. Presets are downloaded much faster, and you can now search through presets, and there are a lot of usability improvements as well. And finally, there's also a preview of GNOME OS for mobile devices, specifically for the PinePhone and the PinePhone Pro, if you want to try out the new GNOME Shell Mobile. And that's definitely something I will do in my own time, and if there's enough to show and if it's ready enough, I'll probably make a video about it. Peertube 4.3 is out. If you're not familiar with it, it's a YouTube alternative that's distributed and works with linked instances, much like Mastodon does as a Twitter alternative. And version 4.3 might be the one that makes Peertube finally more interesting to YouTubers, as it now has automatic import of videos from a remote channel. As in, click one button and import all your past and future YouTube videos into your Peertube channel. On top of that, the account creation has been redesigned with actual designers to be more legible, better explained, and more streamlined. Embedding videos and live streams is also better handled. It's possible to set the resolution in which videos are transcoded to save some space, and it's possible to delete certain formats for each video, again to save some space on the instance. While some of my videos make it to the Tilvids instance with my permission, this new update kinda makes it a lot easier for me to get into Peertube. So I will be looking into instances that might accept my pretty sizable backlog of videos and see if they can handle that kind of data storage. And if they don't, I'll look into solutions to maybe create my own. Now let's talk Linux hardware, because there are a few interesting things happening. First, Manjaro has partnered up with Slimbook to sell the Slimbook Titan in a Manjaro edition. This device is a beast of a gaming laptop and still keeps a relatively low profile, and now it has a Manjaro edition complete with the logo on the back. What's interesting with this one is that it enabled Manjaro to work on hybrid graphics mode and perfect it. And Slimbook also made sure their utilities that let you control the CPU mode, advanced battery life controls, and the RGB keyboard of the Titan all work well on Manjaro and are in their repos out of the box. And we also have a very interesting first look at the Starlabs Starfighter, a completely custom designed laptop from Starlabs. It will be an ultrabook with either 12th gen Intel CPUs or AMD's 6000 series Ryzen processors, and it will sport a 16:10 4K screen that folds 180 degrees. It has a haptic trackpad with a fingerprint sensor, good speakers, and a removable webcam and mic combo that can attach to the top bezel or detach from it. Interestingly, it looks like it might start at $900 US, which would be pretty affordable for such a modern beast. I really like the approach that Starlabs has to designing their own chassis and their own laptops. They're not reusing Clevo or Tongfeng designs. They're building their stuff from the ground up. And the Starfighter looks like a pretty good addition to their lineup. I hope they'll send me a review unit and I'll make a video about it when it arrives. But also, I really wish they had a laptop with a dedicated GPU option. AMD or Nvidia, I don't care, but that's something that people need. And let's finish this video with the gaming news. First is an update on SteamOS. Valve said that they're still working on bringing SteamOS to other devices, with an official installer that will let you dual boot SteamOS and Windows, or another OS. And they also said they're excited to bring SteamOS to other manufacturers, so maybe there's some stuff to be announced on that front soon. They're also working with developers to help them change their default config on the Steam Deck, so users don't have that much settings to tweak, and they're reaching out to devs to bring their unsupported titles to playable or verified status. There's also a new SteamOS stable update, although it's mostly bug fixes, improvements to the keyboard and trackpad typing, with a fix for the super annoying missed keystrokes in desktop mode. And there's a lot of improvements to Steam input in-game. Valve also gave an interview at the Tokyo Game Show, and it's a very interesting read, explaining the target for the deck, how it helped with Steam game sales, how they handle thermals and battery management, as well as their view on the Switch as a competitor. It's an interesting read for which you'll find a link in the description below, like virtually every other article in this video or any news video of mine. And finally, we have a Wine update this week. Wine 7.18 has an update to Unicode 15. They have WoW 64 support on macOS and fixes for GStreamer. On top of that, there are 20 bug fixes, including for Hotel Giant 2, Resident Evil 7, Cube World, KeyPass XC, and a lot more. I really hope Valve brings that SteamOS official ISO for other devices soon, because I've been trying out Holo ISO and I've been having very poor luck with it on Nvidia graphics. It just never worked right at all for me. So I hope they will bring that ISO and it will bring better compatibility for my devices. Speaking of better compatibility, how about today's sponsors' devices? Tuxedo is a company based in Germany, and they sell laptops and desktops that run Linux out of the box. And why would you want that? Well, it's pretty easy. It just lets you get a device that runs Linux perfectly without all the hassle of researching online if this model supports Linux, if the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth works, if the fingerprint sensor works, if the webcam works. You know that when you buy a Tuxedo device, it will run Linux, period. No problems, no compatibility issues, nothing. And while you can buy those devices with a set of pre-installed distros, you can also install whatever else you want on them. And they have a huge range that will answer every price point and every need. They have customization options galore for every model. You can have your own logo on the back, you can have a custom keyboard layout. Basically, they can answer your need. So if you need a new Linux device and you want to make sure that it's a no-brainer and that everything works, click the link in the description below and get yourself a laptop or a desktop from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like it, well, this dislike button also exists. But do tell me why in the comments, it's just more polite this way. And if you really enjoy the channel and my videos, there's a PayPal link in the description, a super thanks button underneath the video, or you can join my Patreon subscribers or YouTube members. Both get access to a weekly podcast and the right to vote on the next topics I'll cover. So thanks everyone for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!